Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome you in Brussels, because I'm native from Brussels. And as you know, you are in the part of the historical center of Brussels. At the origin, it was a very poor neighborhood. And 1 century ago, a very modernist, a liberal mayor of Brussels decided to launch here, around 200 meters far from here, the first public school for children in Brussels. It's, I would say, a house designed by the well-known architect, Victor Horta, I would say the leader of art design like Guimard in Paris. And it was a real revolution. There were many disputes at political level. Many people were not convinced by the fact to give the possibility for everybody to go at school without paying for that. That's maybe also a challenge for us tonight, because of course financial education, it means by definition financial inclusion. And therefore I would like also to thank the famous International Federation of Finance Museum for inviting the local guy, the Belgian regulator, the FSMA, to close this very interesting conference here in Brussels. And also I would like to thank you, Raymond and Wim, because I know your personal involvement in financial education, which is not something that political leaders expect from the banking community. And frankly speaking, I appreciate very much that the European Banking Formation is so deeply involved in all this initiative. It's also an excellent example of a fruitful partnership, public-private, one of also the key elements of the discussion today. So that's the reason, of course, why it goes without saying that I am delighted to be here among you. Also taking into account the exceptional quality of the presenter, I think that we may say that it's like in a famous advertising of Benetton. I'm sorry to say that, you know, United Colors, not of Benetton, but United Colors. I didn't pay any copyright for that. That's really the case, because when I see how many people involved in the management, in a lot of local initiative at national level, in different kind of situations. The situation is not necessarily the same in all jurisdictions, even in Europe. We have different backgrounds, and so that's the reason why we need to exchange of view in order to support all the marvelous initiatives which are taking place, especially at the time being about financial education. I've been asked, first of all, to be a little bit provocative. It's not a problem for me. From time to time, I feel like E.T. in the community of supervisors, but also to be provocative because I've been asked to give you some comments at the end of this very interesting conference about the point of view of a financial regulator. How do we see that? What role can it play in restoring the confidence of consumers in the financial sector? The DNA of the day-to-day mission statement of my people in Belgium, working at the level of the Belgium Financial Services and Market Authority, and what are the major challenges? I would start with two comments, with that a bit provocative. First of all, in fact, my translation of what we are doing today is about diversity. When I see people in the first row, Philippe is working for a private bank. Sylvia, your building was sponsored by the central bank. There are a lot of international activity. I would say you are from the academic world. In Torino, it's also a bank. In Belgium, we will have the pleasure to invite you in how many days, Daniel? In 6 months for the launch of a new Wikifin Lab, the first financial education center in Belgium, which is managed by a financial supervisor, which is not a central bank, but I would say more or less the same kind of mission statement that the British FCA, because we are working in a Twin Peaks model. Twin Peaks model mean, not to say the famous broadcasting of the 90s in Australia, maybe also there are common link, strange people, supervisor, but we are working with the central bank. Central bank in Belgium is in charge for the supervision of solvency, for liquidity aspect of macro prudential aspect, and we are in charge for product supervision, rule of conduct, supervision of stock exchange, product supervision, and also financial education. So it means that there are no common features because all these initiatives, some of them are initiative of a private bank, a community of bankers, a central bank, non-profit organization, academic world, or even other kind of financial supervisor like us. So it means, in fact, and that's the second provocative comment, the involvement of financial supervisor is, in fact, from an academic point of view, not obvious. And when I see the situation in Germany, in Austria, in the UK, in the US, my dear colleague, we are excellent people, very professional people, are not involved in financial education. In Belgium, that's the case. In the Netherlands, that's the central bank. In France, it's not the Belgium FSMA, but La Banque de France, the central bank. So it means a lot of different situations. And the reason is, of course, quite obvious. It means, I would say, how to be successful in lobbying for that. Do you consider that you have to play a role in order to enhance financial education? In Belgium, I used to be a single regulator until 2011, and I lobbied at political level in order to implement a Twin Peaks model, which is quite strange because I was the only one on board, and I proposed to divide that between the central bank and the FSMA. My feeling, it was not about lessons to be learned about some possible conflict of interest. Even during the crisis in 2008 of the FSMA, I didn't feel any kind of conflict. The question was, it's time to specialize our people. My people don't react on the same way when they are involved in the prudential supervision or if they are involved in consumer protection. The objective was also to be in line with the new European architecture. And that's the reason why we launched Twin Peaks. But the launch of Twin Peaks in Belgium means also for the first time in a bit more than 80 years of history of a financial supervisory system in Belgium, that someone was involved in financial education. Before the Twin Peaks, I didn't have any kind of legal provision in order to promote financial education, which is quite strange. And that's maybe the reason why many single regulators, like the BaFin in Germany, I presume, for instance, in Austria, are not necessarily a mission statement related to financial education. And what's the reason? Pure lobbying. To have, I would say, some people telling, okay, lessons to be learned from the financial education means something for us in our day-to-day life. It's not only about some conference, it's our day-to-day life. And therefore, we need to be involved in financial education. And due to the Twin Peaks, we were quite successful in lobbying, and to be able to lobby for putting in the current Belgian legislation a new legal provision, assuming the fact that the FSMA is able to be involved in promoting financial education, but also to find budget. But, and that's very important, not alone. Not, I would say, in the framework of a kind of monopolistic approach, with many kind of partnership with other supervisory bodies, other ministers, education, economy, finance, or even, I would say, representative of the business community, because we think that we need to be a team in order to be successful. That's also interesting to understand because it means that there is not necessarily, I'm sorry Anna Maria to tell you that, but from a academic point of view, the reason why some of the supervisors are involved in financial education is not necessarily linked with a very rational history. It's about, I would say, involvement, the capacity to take some lessons to be learned from the crisis in Europe, in the US, and in other continents from 2008. And what are precisely, I would say, the lessons to be learned in order to enhance the protection of financial consumer, but more generally speaking, about our citizens? As you know, it's not a surprise. Everybody knows that in this room, in the wake of the financial crisis, measures taken at many levels have reinforced the regulatory and legal framework. And all these measures have intended to ensure the client understand the essential feature of the product they are buying, and that the financial institution place client interest at the center, and that clients are protected wherever necessary. That's the starting point. The problem of the challenge about our involvement in financial education is to avoid to have a political message about financial education. Some people would say, I strongly advocate the fact that we have to enhance financial education, full stop. Other people, I would say not necessarily the same political color, are advocating only for a framework which means tougher rules for members of the Association of Raymond. And that's, I would say, the tricky point, I would say. That's the starting point of many studies. Because when we had to discuss at the Parliament, I remember quite well some reaction. If you are advocating for a better financial education in Belgium, does it mean, Mr. Servais, that for you there are no lessons to be learned? Does it mean that you are not advocating for tougher rules about capping bonus, about more robust banks, about a new Basel III principle, Solvency II for insurance, about better rules in order to protect consumers when they have a dialogue with the banker? That's what we call in Europe MiFID rule, or product supervision. At the contrary, my message was quite easy. These two aspects are closely linked together. There is no chance to be a tough supervisor if you don't promote financial education. There is no chance to enhance the level of financial education as a financial supervisor if at the same time you are a tough but proportionate financial supervisor. All these aspects are linked together. And due to the fact that we refuse to pay more attention to the agenda relating to the banker versus a better financial education, I think that was the reason why we have made some progress in Belgium about financial education. Of course, I am not objective, I'm telling you, because I am a kind of salesman for my own supervisory body. But I think that people are now realizing that all these aspects are closely linked. Let us maybe give you some example of what we are doing as supervisor. What does it mean, I would say, to be a financial supervisor, specialized in product supervision, rule of conduct? It means, first of all, to have an appropriate toolkit of weapons, if I may say, in order to ensure an appropriate level of product supervision. It means also to go in the field, to send inspectors in order to check the quality of the dialogue between a banker and a possible client when the client is interested in buying a new financial product or to receiving some financial advice. Product supervision means also that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. There are, in fact, three parts of our toolkit. First of all, we strongly believe in a classical tool which is called transparency. It's about the prospectus for a new IPO. It's about a prospectus of a kit document for new UCITS. If it's not sufficient, we need, of course, to have discussion with the industry. That's what we did in Belgium, because we have a very active industry specialized in structured products. We had some fear about, I would say, the increasing complexity of structured products. 7 years ago, after the crisis of 2008, some of this product, which is an important market size in Belgium, 60 billion, were using more than 11 criteria in order to compute the return or the possible protection of capital. It was too complex. And I proposed to industry to implement a new, I would say, copy and paste of a famous song of John Lennon. You know the famous song of John Lennon, "Give Peace a Chance." My leitmotif was, give a banker a chance. Do you accept to sign with me a document, I would say a gentleman agreement, in which you say, okay, fine, I will refuse to distribute product, complex product, if they are too difficult, even if all these products are in line with all kind of regulation at Belgium of EU level. All these UCITS, all these notes, all these bonds were fully in line with all kind of regulation. UCITS 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and all. But the problem, it was not about the risk profile, it was about the complexity. It's also a problem of financial education. And my surprise was that all banks in Belgium, except Euroclear, but Euroclear is not a retail bank, as you know maybe, decide to sign on a voluntary basis, which was a shame for me, because my expectation was to have some bad boys or bad girls refusing to sign the agreement. No, everybody considered it was interesting, even if I didn't have any kind of legal basis for doing that. That's the second tool. The third toolkit, and then we are switching to too risky product, and that's the agenda in which we believe in Belgium, which is not necessarily the same in all countries. It's about banning product which are too risky. That's for product supervision. Rule of conduct. How to have an appropriate level of trust between a banker or a life insurance and a client. How to ensure an appropriate level of documentation when you, as citizen or financial consumer, as discussing with your banker. How to be sure that there is no conflict of interest, that you have an appropriate level of duty of care, that the service provided by your bank or the product offered are in line with your knowledge, your financial education, the size of your assets, and I would say the perspective for investing in this kind of product. Is it short-term, mid-term, or long-term? That's what we are doing with the so-called MiFID regulation. We decide at the start of the FSMA to restart from scratch. I had the pleasure to engage more or less 30 inspectors. They are not allowed to work in the premises of the FSMA. They have to go night and day in the banks, in the queue, to perform mystery shopping. All this, I think, show that we consider that as supervisor, there are clear lessons to be learned from the crisis. You could believe, after 6 years, that I'm not so popular for the bankers, which is, I would say, not bad, because if you have a too popular supervisor, there are also some questions about integrity. But I was very pleased to see that the industry was able to understand this message, because let us be clear, what we are doing in Belgium is maybe not necessarily the same kind of supervision than in other EU member states. I think, and I'm sorry if it looks a little bit arrogant, I don't think that all my colleagues decide to have, I would say, a team of 35 professional staff on a day-to-day basis in the banks, in the queue with mystery shopping. But after some recent years, I had the pleasure to see that I didn't have any kind of dispute with the banks which are supervised by the Belgian supervisor. Even if I may say that some of these reports were very tough, but it was explained. Whenever I had to give a bad report, tone at the top, you know, there's the kind of things you have to hear when you have to testify at the parliament. Tone at the top means that the CEO is not only my office, but also the chair of the supervisory board and the chair of the audit committee. It's not about the most important, the highest amount of fine. It's about, I would say, how to ensure that things are changing. That's the reason why recovery plan is so important. But one of the most important pleasures for me was to see that some CEO understood the message, said, okay, fine, I receive a bad report from the supervisor. What does it mean for me? One example, one bank decided to refuse bonus to his head of retail network because he received a very bad report about rule of conduct MiFID. That's very clever. It's not about implementation of legal provision at EU rules. It's about changing the behavior of the banker. There is a problem to give the possibility to receive a bonus and at the same time have difficult report about quality of implementation with it. And that's the reason why I think that this very, I would say, tough agenda as financial supervisor has to be supported by a necessity to have an added value about financial education. Because when we speak about the link between what we are doing as financial supervisor and our possible involvement in order to enhance the level of financial education, it's not only about toolkit, it's also about the rationale. Because I think that we have to admit that the financial crisis 10 years ago forced regulator and supervisor to reconsider the famous traditional paradigm of the rational financial consumer. By definition, as we know, as citizens, but also as parents, I would say, human beings are subject to irrational impulses and irrational behavior, which can aggravate a financial crisis. One example, which is quite well known, individuals tend to follow the mainstream and in your objective signs and indicator. That's what it's called herd behavior. And when dealing with financial consumer, regulator must admit that they should draw on these sorts of insight from behavioral economics. That's also what we are doing in our day-to-day life. I presume that many of you as are parents of nice, lovely teenagers. How can you understand that you need teenagers, 15 years old, is now a fashion victim after 3 months? That was my experience in my last holidays. My son, 15 years old, was becoming a fashion victim. As you can see, it's not the case of his father, not his mother. Why? Because he was impressed by the reaction of his group at school. So how can we manage this kind of irrational behavior? And besides, when we switch a little bit more to financial education, how can we ensure an appropriate level of involvement as a financial supervisor in the day-to-day life of teenagers who are not able to understand that they are already financial consumers and that their day-to-day life can be also translated in some key aspect of financial consumer protection. When the same teenager, my son, is going to his tennis lesson every Saturday and going home to the home of a guy who banned bitcoins in Belgium and telling me, I have a problem with your explanation. My teacher in tennis explained me that he was able to book a profit of 2,000 euro with Bitcoin in 1 week. How can you explain that? Is it something wrong? That's a real challenge, as we know about financial consumer protection. It's not necessarily, I would say, about how to invest as a professional in a very traditional environment. You go to the bank, you know that you would be interested in buying some financial product. It's about day-to-day. And that's the reason why also I think that one of the key aspects for supervisors to have a successful journey about financial education is to come with messages which are not linked necessarily for mission statement. Many people in Belgium expected that we would open a financial center dedicated to financial products. How to invest in the stock exchange. How to understand difficult, complex products. What is a life insurance? Of course, it's part of our knowledge wall. Of course, it's part of them. But the objective of financial element is to be there where people don't expect that we are on a market. During the national, the 4th of July in Belgium, when they are taking the train, at school, it means when people don't expect that they will have information about financial education. And which kind of message? Not about how to invest to promote the stock exchange. For this, we have other dedicated information stream and professional part of our website. The objective was, I would say, how to translate the famous expression, first thing first. Which kind of information do you need if you want to have, I would say, a budget which is fine for your day-to-day life? Which kind of information do you need? If you are not able to understand, who are the partners? Is it in your family? Is it outside? So a kind of Socratic approach. And that's, I think, the key aspect for financial supervisor, not to come with a story which is only linked with the day-to-day mission statement. And it's very important, especially in the digital environment, because knowledge, and I think that it was very well detailed by Professor Menkov this morning. I was not there, but I had some people doing mystery shopping this morning in the room, and I've been told that one of his messages of Professor Menkov was to say, okay, knowledge and behavior, two main aspects of financial education. Knowledge, it's a kind of quick win. Of course, you can explain which kind of information. Behavior, it's a long-term objective, is to have a dialogue with new consumer, teenager, at school, which is, I think, a very important focus for us, in order to have a kind of dialogue for which are not expected by this new consumer, and to, I would say, to have an added value in order to support the effort to see, to understand which kind of information they need in order to have to enhance their level of financial education. That's, according to our experience, at least in Belgium, small country, one of the key aspects for having a successful journey, and also to be able to exchange our views, our experience, to receive information, because we have to learn from each other. And again, thanks a lot to the International Federation of Finance Community, because there's a marvelous network for that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Paul. Much appreciated.
Good financial education for me. I exceed only with 6 minutes.
Only 6:55. Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm taking the risk of asking you one question. Yeah. And I know you like to speak, but let me try to be a bit bold here as well, and forgive me for doing this. But I'm also a parent. When my daughter was 14 years old, she discovered online shopping, and she discovered that she could buy clothes online. And she created this app in this online store, also here in Belgium. And the app actually concluded, this is young Mrs. Franken, they live on this street, this postcode. The app was connected to a data supplier, which knew that there were 4 people living in this household. And this retailer had a contract with a credit advisory firm, which guaranteed a credit of up to €100 per person living in the household for anyone registering that particular app. So what happened was that my 14-year-old daughter was given a €400 credit in the app, not by a bank, not by an established financial services institution, but by a high street retailer working internationally, who had very smartly looked at this option and used that part of their marketing. But it's a financial digital service that is part of the new landscape that we face. We also had Professor Lusardi this morning saying that very clearly with the evidence that if you're digitally savvy, you're actually at risk of having financial problems, because it's so easy to click on all these functions in the new fintech community. And that I'd like to attach to a comment also raised again in the last few days in the United States. The next financial crisis starts the very moment that the old one is over. Don't you feel like you're still fighting the old one and not looking at the new one with the new challenges that we have?
Thanks for the question, Raymond. We didn't speak to each other before this conference, because that's exactly the question I was expecting. Because there is indeed a danger that people like me would be a little bit old-fashioned, even if they are only 55 years old. But that's the reason why I was convinced by Daniel and staff to launch a Wikifin lab in Belgium for a full digital experience, like in Vienna and so, after we visit also Vienna. And because the reason why we decide to do that is how to understand what it means a digital environment. I know that was one of the key aspects of your speech this morning. And that's maybe the challenge, because digital environment means, by definition, speed. It means, I would say, many opportunities. But for us as supervisors, it means, by definition, that we have to pay much more attention, because a lot of teenagers don't realize that when they are using, I would say, a digital environment, they are consumer. At the same time, I am not sure that your daughter, who is maybe now 16 years old, I think, no?
14.
14, still fun, okay? I think that she understands after some experience that if they see something on internet, after some year they will understand, okay, that people explaining them that they have to invest in this product, receive for this a payment. They will understand that by definition, nothing is to be found on internet if you don't have to pay. I think that for this they need, I would say, teachers. They need partners in order to explain what it means, a digital environment. But also that's the reason why in Belgium, the first step of a new financial education center, that won't be a stock exchange. It won't be, I would say, a kind of copy and paste of our old-fashioned bank agency of subsidiary. It will be, Danielle, I would say, a kind of mall. People working in a mall in order to explain, okay, what are your influence? Why do you consider that you have to wear these jeans? And nothing to do with, I would say, the world of a financial supervisor, so involved in the supervision. That's, I think, what people expect about financial education. How to receive help in their day-to-day life, how to manage their budget, how to understand the marketing influence. That's, I would say, a lot of transversal knowledge. And if we want to be successful, especially when you have to have a dialogue with teachers in the school, I am used to saying in Belgium that the teacher, I would say, are the first ambassador of financial education. They are not the only one. But if we want to have a strong, long-term, sustainable partnership with the teacher, we have to explain that we are not the supervisor, try to explain that they have to invest in usage, that it's a safe investment of a life insurance. We have to explain what is a possible added value about, I would say, easy things to understand in the day-to-day management. And if we are able to understand that, it means that we are going the right direction in order to facilitate financial inclusion.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to taking my daughter, who is 16 now,
it will be a pleasure to invite you.
Thank you. Job also.